Is the air polluted? Indeed. Climate chaos is indeed a symptom of the high levels of pollution in our air.
We're sitting in a situation where there are 386 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. 350 parts per million is where we need to be in order to avert increase in temperatures of above 2 degrees Celsius. This doesn't seem like a complete train smash, 2 degrees Celsius, but I think what people don't realize is the interconnectedness of everything.
Certainly in the urban conurbations, it's more intense given the larger volumes of traffic and so on and so forth polluting the air.
Cities in South Africa generally do have very bad problems with air quality. Cape Town's very fortunate because we've got the southeaster, which tends to blow away a lot of the air pollution. We have the southeaster and the northwester, but in wintertime we have temperature inversion and we have a problem that's known as the brown haze. And you have very dense, because you get cold air trapped underneath warm air and the air doesn't move away. So you get a lot of pollution. Most of that brown air pollution comes from diesel emissions.
Air quality is a very important indicator of other environmental health issues in South Africa. And I think it's unfortunately convenient for many polluters of the common good of air and atmosphere that it's in many cases invisible. It's difficult for big manufacturing plants that spew out black smoke or that produce lots of particulate matter to escape notice and quite often the application of the law that follows that.
Your air quality is incredibly important as far as human health is concerned. If you don't have good air quality, your health will be impacted, both through issues like pollution and, probably more important, particles lodging in your lungs. A lot of smoke particles lead to cancers, and with bad air quality, they reckon in areas of bad air quality, they reckon about 5% of deaths can be put to bad air quality.
If you had to take the total amount of emissions on the planet and divide it equitably amongst people and say each person has the same right to pollute, as it were, then you would find on a pure per capita basis, America would have to cut its emissions 60% to hit equity on a per person basis. But China could double its emissions to hit equity on a per person basis.
Particularly in South Africa, we find ourselves amongst the top emitters in the world. I think the latest figures are that we're the 13th largest per capita emitter in the world. Per capita would really suggest that we're a nation full of over-consumers, which is really not the case. Most of the people in South Africa don't consume at all, so hardly have a carbon footprint.
So the fact that India and China are emitting large amounts, they're not emitting large amounts on a per capita basis for the numbers of people they have. So that's the first thing to get right, is that the overconsumption of the North is the problem. So the rich nations, North America, Europe, Korea and Japan, make up 25% of the world's population, but they generate 80% of the pollution. So that's the first thing to get right, is to say we've got too many rich people on the planet over-consuming the resources, not too many poor people. That's not true.
Now, if you think, just think about it. Water component and the air component and the food component, so interlinked. They are now, everybody's shouting now about water and food. But one of the components that's crucial to it, which is the air, which is being polluted, why climate change is actually being caused because of air pollution. That is why there is the climate change. And the climate change goes into the water resources, goes into the food resources. So how can you say you're addressing these two things now and tomorrow we'll think of the air? It's got to be a collective thing. It's got to be on the table immediately. Guys, we cannot be saying now it's water's time and then next year it'll be the air time and then it'll be no. It's how are we addressing it now?
Our environment is going to change in a big way. We need urgent action. In fact, if we had to reduce all our emissions today to zero, we would still have climate change happening over the next 50 years. So even reducing is not enough. These levels that they're talking about, 80% reduction by 2050, is actually the minimum that we need to reduce by. We need a whole complete paradigm shift in the way we do things and a complete change in belief systems and thinking.
heavy industry is always situated in poorer areas, or poorer suburbs have aggregated and congregated around industrial areas, sort of dormitory suburbs. In Cape Town in particular, the heavy industry, as in the refinery, it used to be out in the middle of nowhere, and now there's huge suburbs all around it because it's the only place basically where the city can go to grow. And there are a lot of complaints from the residents of impacts on air quality there, people complaining of asthma, especially again in winter in times of temperature inversion when there's no wind blowing the pollution away. And the residents around there have been quite seriously impacted.
Mpumalanga is where the people are really feeling the impact in terms of the coal mines and the emissions from those energy stations. We're simply using it. We can't just wash our hands of that problem. We are part of the problem because we're using the energy that's produced there.
So the real issue in South Africa is because of the really dirty source of our energy as well as the inefficient infrastructure generating that electricity. We find ourselves in a situation where the embedded carbon and energy in our products and services is ridiculously high compared to other countries.
If you look at any Highveld sunset during winter, where tons of coal is being burnt, beautiful sunsets, but all of that colour in the sunset is brought on by pollution, smoke pollution, and people are breathing that in all the time. So some serious impacts on the health of people, and especially you've got the big industrial conurbations, Sasolburg and Secunda, huge pollution around those areas. And again, of course, you've got the satellite suburbs for the workers around those areas.
For instance, right here in Manenberg, there's one industrial area on that side and there's another industrial area on the other end. So a lot of the pollution, especially around air pollution, it ends up here.
And if you look at the hospitals that are more full with people that are suffering from TB are the ones that are here in our communities. And some of us, we're working for those big industries. As much as they're big industries, but they have people who are working there, and we're part of us formulating this pollution.
We've landed up subsidizing them. So a few years ago, when petrol in South Africa was about 5 rand, we did some research, tried to internalize the external costs. So the war in Iraq, the struggle of the Ogoni people in Nigeria along Shell pipelines, tankers crashing off Cape Point and polluting the penguins, kids in South Durban having double the upper respiratory tract infections in the country, Sasol workers being exploded, plastics killing us, all these outside costs of non-renewable resources like coal and oil are not internalized. And when we try to do it, you can't, of course, internalize the cost of a life, but maybe health costs you can try to quantify. Petrol should have been around the 28 rand a litre mark. So that's the amount of subsidy that society is subsidizing these energy-dense and DOF sources of energy.